Hi there, it's Riikka Kovasin here today, and I'm making an art journal spread for A.B.Studio. I'm mixing different collections in this spread, but I'm mainly using collected moments as my inspiration. I'm first cutting a piece fitting inside my journal from this Nothing But You 12 by 12 sheet. I use masking tape to tape the two pieces together so I can work side by side with them. I'm also using the same tape to add a little bit of texture and kind of guiding lines to the background. To add another element there, I'm also adding some white cotton tape on top, which then draws the color in differently than the paper or the masking tape. On top, I then make a little bit raised layer using crackle paste and an A.B.Studio stencil. Again, you can see all the used supplies in the description box. While I let the paste air dry, I prepare some layers for the focal point. I'm drawing inspiration from the clusters in the Collected Moments collection. I'm cutting different pieces of paper from these pattern 12 by 12s and treating them a little bit differently. I distress some of the edges to make them look even more worn, and then in a later stage ink the edges as well. One of the papers already has this kind of a fabric pattern, so I treat it like it would be fabric, but I also make another piece of more like fabric or really old paper by crumbling one of the pieces of the papers I'm going to then add behind the focal point. Next, I turn my attention to this butterfly. It's black and white, so I add some colors on top. The color inspiration is actually from these chipboards that I'm coloring next because they remind me of lavender. So I'm using lilac and then a little bit of brown. For the chipboards, I'm first adding some watercolor pencils and crayons to add color on top, and then I add more texture and color through embossing powders. I'm not coating the whole surface with one powder, but more like just sprinkle different colors on top. So the end result is not a solid layer of one color, but has more visual texture to it. So I'm using even white powder there, then some lilac, then some gray, and lastly I cover the whole thing with translucent powder. Now that the crackle paste has had some time to dry, I then turn my attention to the background again. I'm using two A.B.Studio stamps to add a little bit of visual texture there. You can see the crackle pattern just yet, but wait a minute, so I'll add some color on top and then it starts to appear from the background. For the colorants, I'm using the same pencils I already had on my table, so the watercolor pencils. I'm first just scribbling to my craft mat and picking the color with a wet brush, but that doesn't create enough color. It's too pale this way, so instead I grab the color directly from the pencil, and this gives me a vibrant enough color. At first I'm just adding some lilac inspired by the lavender branches coming on top, but I'm also bringing in some brown. For that I'm using the same ink pad I used to ink around the edges of the layers. While then the colorants dried for a while, I then layered the pieces I prepared earlier with distressing and inking and made a cluster using those. I then cut the two background pieces apart and adhere them to my journal and then put the cluster on top. I also used a bit of twine to make it more like a stack of letters idea that's from the collection, where there's these lovely clusters of old papers as a pattern. Then it's just kind of the finishing touches. As you could see, I took a photo of the layout with my phone and then I'm repeating it, kind of just minding the gap in between the pages. These spiral bound journals are kind of a lifeline for me because I love to make dimensional pages, and if it wouldn't have this kind of binding, I could do just a couple of pages before the binding actually broke. So that's why I favor these spiral bound journals. I'm adding the last details, so the embellishments I already had in my mind, but they're like the lavender branches and the butterfly. Then I add little details like pieces of lace and pieces of cotton tape, trim the excess from the twine and finish the page with some buttons and a bit of journaling in the form of text sticker. This is my way of doing an art journal spread, working on the two pages simultaneously, especially if you're working in a spiral bound journal. This is a lovely way to keep the background kind of continuing from page to page. And there you have it. Here's my art journaling spread using various collections, but drawing inspiration from the vintage feels of the collected moments. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider subscribing and hit that bell sign to be notified when a new video comes live. Please let me know your ideas, and I'll be seeing you next month with another video for A.B.Studio. Thank you. Bye.